The luxury yacht drifting through the asteroid belt should have been empty, which made the life signs showing up on Jake Sullivan's scanner either very good news or very bad news, depending on how optimistic you were about finding survivors in derelict spacecraft. Given that Jake's salvage crew had been having the kind of week where even their coffee maker had developed an attitude problem, he was leaning toward the pessimistic interpretation. "Captain, I'm reading one life form in the lower compartments," reported Tommy Chen from the pilot station, his voice carrying the particular tone of someone who'd learned to expect complications. "Heartbeats elevated, but stable. Whoever's down there is very much alive." Jake studied the scanner readings while mentally calculating how this discovery would affect their salvage timeline. The yacht Serenity's Dream had been reported missing 3 months ago after departing from the luxury resort stations near Jupiter, and according to insurance records, it should have been carrying a full complement of wealthy passengers and crew. The fact that only one person remained raised uncomfortable questions about what had happened to everyone else. "Maria, what's our status on the airlock seals?" Jake called to his chief engineer. "All green, Captain," Maria Santos replied from the engineering console. "Though I should mention that this ship's internal atmosphere has been maintained at full life support levels. Someone's been very much alive in there for quite some time." Alex Petrov, their security chief, was already checking his equipment with the methodical precision of someone whose military training had taught him to prepare for the worst possible scenarios. "Could be a trap, Captain. Pirates sometimes use survivors as bait to lure salvage crews into ambushes." "Could be," Jake agreed. "Could also be someone who's been waiting 3 months for rescue. Tommy, keep us positioned for a quick exit. Maria, full sensor sweeps for any other ships in the area. Alex, you're with me." The interior of Serenity's Dream was a testament to the kind of wealth that treated starships as personal art projects rather than mere transportation. The corridors were lined with rare wood paneling that had probably cost more than Jake's entire ship, and the gravity plating was so perfectly calibrated that walking felt like floating through an expensive dream. Emergency lighting cast everything in an amber glow that somehow managed to be both elegant and ominous. They found her in what had once been a passenger suite, though the room had been converted into something resembling a survival shelter. Supply crates were stacked along the walls, and a makeshift workstation suggested someone had been very busy during their extended stay. She was small, barely reaching Jake's shoulder, with the distinctive pointed ears and luminescent skin markings that identified her as Altarian. Her clothes were expensive but showed signs of long wear, and when she looked up at their approach, her eyes held the particular combination of hope and desperation that Jake had learned to recognize in people who'd been waiting too long for rescue. "Please," she said, and her voice carried the musical accent of someone whose first language had evolved under different stars. "You are not with Kozlov, are you?" Jake raised his hands in what he hoped was a universally peaceful gesture. "Ma'am, I'm Captain Jake Sullivan. This is Security Chief Petrov. We're a salvage crew, not affiliated with anyone named Kozlov. Are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" She studied their faces with an intensity that seemed to look past surface appearances to something deeper. Whatever she saw there appeared to reassure her, because some of the tension left her posture. "I am Zara of the Moonweaver clan," she said, attempting what might have been a formal introduction despite the circumstances. "I have been hiding here for many days. I lost count after the first month." "What happened to the other passengers and crew?" Alex asked, his tone carefully neutral. Zara's expression darkened. "They were taken. Dmitry Kozlov, he operates from a station in the Outer Rim. He takes people with special abilities, makes them work for him. My mother." Her voice broke slightly. "My mother is still there." Jake felt the familiar weight of moral complexity settling on his shoulders. Salvage work was supposed to be simple: find valuable materials, extract them efficiently, avoid getting killed by unstable debris or competing crews. Rescuing survivors was one thing, but getting involved in whatever criminal operation had targeted this ship was entirely another. "Your mother was a passenger on this vessel?" he asked. "She is a healer, a diplomat." We were traveling to the Centauri colonies for a humanitarian mission when Kozlov's people attacked. They took everyone with useful skills, empaths, healers, engineers, anyone who could be. She paused, searching for words. Anyone who could be made valuable to the right buyer. The implications of what she was describing made Jake's stomach turn. The illegal trade in sentient beings was one of the galaxy's ugliest realities, made worse by the fact that certain species possessed abilities that made them particularly sought after by criminal organizations. Why didn't they take you? Alex asked. I hid. I am not trained like my mother, my empathic abilities are weak, undeveloped. I was not worth the trouble of hunting through the ship's lower levels. Her hands clenched into fists. I watched them take her. I watched, and I did nothing. Jake recognized the sound of someone carrying guilt that was eating them alive from the inside. You survived. That's not nothing. Surviving is not enough. She stood, and Jake was surprised by the sudden intensity in her posture. Human captain, I make you an offer. Save my mother from Kozlov Station, and I will serve you faithfully for the rest of my life. I will be your servant, your companion, whatever you require. I have nothing else to offer, but I offer everything I am. The words hung in the recycled air of the luxury yacht like a challenge to every assumption Jake had about simple salvage operations. Alex was giving him a look that clearly communicated, absolutely not, while Jake's own moral compass spun wildly between practical caution and the memory of his sister, who'd been taken by slavers when he was too young and powerless to stop it. Zara, he said carefully, I appreciate the offer, but we don't do servants. And rescuing people from criminal fortresses isn't exactly our specialty. Then I will die trying alone, she said with quiet conviction. Because I cannot live knowing that my mother suffers while I remain free. Jake looked at the young Eltarian woman who was offering him her entire existence in exchange for help she probably couldn't get anywhere else. The smart move was to drop her off at the nearest coalition station, file a report about the missing passengers, and let proper authorities handle the situation. The smart move was to stick to salvage work and avoid criminal networks that had the resources to make people disappear. Unfortunately, Jake had never been particularly good at smart moves. Tell me about this Kozlov character, he said, ignoring Alex's expression of profound disbelief. And tell me everything you know about his station's defenses. Zara's face lit up with an expression of relief so intense it was almost painful to witness. You will help me? I'll consider it. But first, we're getting you back to my ship and getting some food in you. You look like you've been living on emergency rations for 3 months. I have been. But I learned to make them taste almost edible. It is a useful skill. Jake found himself smiling despite the magnitude of what he was apparently considering. Well, that's something. Tommy's going to be thrilled to hear that someone might be able to improve our food situation. As they made their way back through the yacht's elegant corridors, Zara walking beside him with the careful attention of someone afraid this might all be an elaborate dream, Jake tried to calculate the odds of successfully infiltrating a criminal fortress to rescue a single prisoner. The mathematics were not encouraging. But sometimes, he reflected, the most important decisions weren't about mathematics at all. Explaining to Zara that humans didn't keep servants turned out to be significantly more complicated than explaining quantum mechanics to a particularly stubborn atmospheric processor. She listened to Jake's careful explanation of human concepts of equality and voluntary cooperation with the patient attention of someone humoring a well-meaning but fundamentally confused authority figure. I understand that humans have different customs, she said, arranging their evening meal with the precision of someone performing a sacred ritual. But a life debt cannot be dismissed simply because the creditor finds it inconvenient. You are saving my mother. I belong to you now. Jake watched her transform their standard protein rations into something that actually resembled food through techniques that seemed to involve equal parts chemistry and artistry. Zara, nobody belongs to anybody else. That's kind of a fundamental human principle. Then how do humans express gratitude for services that cannot be repaid? Usually with words. Sometimes with money, if money's involved. Occasionally with alcohol, depending on the circumstances. She paused in her food preparation, clearly puzzled. You saved my life and agreed to risk yours for my mother's freedom, and you believe this can be adequately acknowledged with words? Well, when you put it like that, it does sound kind of inadequate, Tommy admitted from his position at the pilot's console. Also, I don't know what she did to these protein bars, but they actually taste like food now. Real food. With flavors and everything. Maria emerged from the engineering bay with her hands covered in what appeared to be hydraulic fluid and the expression of someone who'd been wrestling with machinery for the better part of 6 hours. Did someone mention real food? Because if so, I'm prepared to discuss the cultural validity of indentured servitude. It's not indentured servitude, Jake protested. It's temporary gratitude expression. With a lifetime commitment, Zara added helpfully. And comprehensive service provisions including household management, technical assistance, and emotional support as required. Alex looked up from the tactical displays he'd been studying. Captain, I think she just described marriage. It's not marriage either. Zara tilted her head with that distinctly non-human gesture that somehow made her look more endearing than alien. What is marriage? The resulting explanation, delivered by 4 humans simultaneously and with competing definitions, left Zara looking more confused than when they'd started. She listened to their overlapping descriptions of romantic partnerships, legal contracts, and emotional commitments with the careful attention of someone trying to understand a completely foreign concept. So marriage is like life debt, she said finally, but temporary and with more arguing. That's actually not a bad summary, Maria admitted. And it includes household management and emotional support. Among other things, yeah. Then perhaps I am offering marriage instead of servitude, Zara concluded with perfect logic. Though I should mention that Altarians typically engage in longer courtship periods before making such commitments. Jake felt the conversation spiraling away from him like a ship with a failed navigation system. Zara, I'm not looking for marriage or servitude or any kind of permanent arrangement. I just want to help you save your mother. Because you are kind, she said, and something in her tone suggested this was a revelation worthy of deep consideration. Altarians value kindness above all other virtues. It is what makes someone worthy of respect, leadership, or life debt. She returned to her food preparation, but Jake noticed that her movements had become more confident, less desperate. Whatever internal calculation she'd been making appeared to have resolved in his favor. Tell me about your mother, he said, settling beside her at the small table that served as their meal preparation area. What kind of healer is she? Zara's expression softened. She can sense emotional states, help people process trauma, resolve conflicts before they become violence. Before the plague, she was one of our world's most respected diplomatic healers. After we became refugees, her abilities made her valuable to people who needed someone to influence negotiations or calm hostile situations. And Kozlov is using her for that? Kozlov uses her for everything. She reads his business partners, tells him their true intentions, helps him manipulate contracts and alliances. He keeps her compliant through. She paused, her hands stilling in their work. Through methods that cause pain when she resists. The casual way she delivered this information made it somehow more horrifying. Jake exchanged glances with his crew, seeing his own anger reflected in their expressions. How long has she been with him? Maria asked gently. 4 years. She was captured during a humanitarian mission to the Vega colonies. I have been searching for her ever since, but Kozlov's operation is well protected and well connected. Local authorities cannot or will not act against him. And you've been alone all this time? Tommy asked. Altarians do not abandon family members. It is impossible for us. We feel each other's emotions across great distances, especially family bonds. I can sense her despair, her hope, her love. It never fades. She looked up at Jake with eyes that held depths he was only beginning to understand. That is why I must serve you, Captain Sullivan. You are the first person in 4 years who has agreed to help without asking what you would gain in return. Jake felt the weight of her gratitude like a physical presence. What I gain is doing the right thing. That should be enough. For humans, perhaps. But Altarian gratitude is not merely emotional, it creates actual bonds. I can feel your intentions, your genuine desire to help. It creates harmony between us. Is that some kind of empathic thing? It is some kind of everything thing. Emotional resonance, psychological compatibility, spiritual alignment. You humans have many different words for the ways people connect with each other. Altarians experience them all simultaneously. Alex cleared his throat diplomatically. Speaking of connections, we should probably discuss the tactical situation. I've been researching Kozlov's operation, and the news is not encouraging. He activated the main display, showing a three-dimensional model of a space station that looked like it had been designed by someone with paranoid tendencies and unlimited resources. Kozlov's reach is built into a hollowed-out asteroid in the Kepler belt. Military-grade shields, automated defense systems, and a private security force of approximately 200 personnel. It's less a space station and more a fortress. How do people visit if it's so heavily defended? Jake asked. Invitation only. Kozlov runs high-end auctions for rare goods and services. Buyers are screened extensively and escorted by armed guards throughout their stay. Zara leaned forward, studying the tactical display with professional interest. I escaped during one of his auctions. Security was focused on the buyers, not on the service personnel. But getting back inside would require someone who could pass for a potential buyer, Jake finished. Someone with enough apparent wealth and connections to warrant an invitation. And someone willing to walk into a fortress full of armed criminals with no backup plan, Maria added cheerfully. This sounds like the kind of idea that gets people killed in very creative ways. All the best ideas carry that risk, Tommy pointed out. Remember the time we salvaged that Martian battle cruiser while it was still shooting at us? That was different. That was just regular life-threatening stupidity. This is life-threatening stupidity with emotional complications. Zara looked between them with growing confusion. Do humans always discuss dangerous plans as if they were mildly amusing inconveniences? Only the good humans, Jake replied. The others take everything too seriously and end up dying of stress-related illnesses. Altarians handle stress through meditation and harmonious emotional expression. We handle it through sarcasm and questionable decision-making. Different approaches, similar survival rates. She laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd heard from her. And the sound was like music played on instruments designed for frequencies human ears weren't supposed to detect. I think I like human stress management better. It involves less sitting still and more actually solving problems. Jake felt something shift in the dynamic between them, some invisible barrier dissolving as she began to understand that his crew's irreverent humor wasn't indifference but rather a coping mechanism for people who regularly faced impossible situations. So, he said, looking around the table at his crew, are we really going to try to infiltrate a criminal fortress to rescue someone we've never met because it's the right thing to do? Sounds like Tuesday to me, Maria said. I'm in, Tommy agreed. But I want it on record that this is definitely our stupidest plan yet. Agreed, Alex said. Which probably means it's crazy enough to work. Zara looked at each of them with an expression of wonder that suggested she was witnessing something she'd never expected to see. You would all risk your lives for my mother. Someone you do not know. We're risking our lives for you, Jake corrected. Your mother is just part of the package. And before you start talking about life debts again, this is what friends do for each other. No servitude required. Friends, she repeated, as if testing the word's flavor. Is friendship another human concept like marriage? Friendship is a universal concept. Though humans probably practice it differently than Altarians. How do Altarians practice friendship? Jake considered this. How do you feel about us right now? She closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. Like I have found something I did not know I was searching for. Like the harmony I feel with you extends to all of you. Like belonging. Then you're already practicing it exactly right. Planning the impossible rescue mission required the kind of creative problem-solving that Jake's crew had perfected through years of salvaging valuable materials from places that actively tried to kill anyone who approached them. The main difference was that this time, instead of avoiding security systems, they were trying to defeat them while keeping everyone involved alive and relatively unincarcerated. The primary challenge, Alex explained while manipulating the tactical hologram, is that Kozlov's reach operates on an invitation-only basis. No invitation, no entry. Try to force your way in, and you get vaporized by automated defense systems that could stop a battle cruiser. Zara sat beside the display, her empathic abilities apparently allowing her to sense the emotional undertones of their planning discussion. I can provide details about the station's internal layout and security protocols, she offered. But accessing that information might be uncomfortable for you to hear. We're salvage crew, Maria said from her position at the engineering console. We've heard plenty of uncomfortable things. Usually from machinery that's trying to explain why it's about to explode. This is different. During my escape, I learned things about Kozlov's operation by observing what he does to maintain control over his forced labor force. The room went very quiet. Jake looked around at his crew, seeing his own anger reflected in their faces, mixed with the kind of grim determination that came from people who decided that some things were worth fighting regardless of the odds. Tell us what we need to know, he said simply. Zara's account of life aboard Kozlov Station was delivered in the clinical tones of someone who'd learned to distance herself emotionally from traumatic information. The arms dealer maintained his operation through a combination of technological control systems and psychological manipulation, keeping empathic species compliant through neural inhibitors that caused pain when they attempted to resist or contact outside help. My mother wears a collar that monitors her emotional state, Zara explained, her voice steady despite the subject matter. If she experiences hope, defiance, or attempts to use her abilities against Kozlov's interests, it delivers neurological feedback that is extremely unpleasant. How extremely unpleasant? Tommy asked, though his expression suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Imagine that every nerve in your body suddenly decided to report that you were being burned alive. Now imagine that sensation lasting for as long as someone chooses to maintain it. Jake felt his hands clench into fists. And this is legal in the Outer Rim territories? Legal is a flexible concept when you have enough money and firepower, Alex said grimly. The Outer Rim operates under corporate jurisdiction rather than coalition authority. If Kozlov has the right permits and maintains the right bribes, he can classify forced laborers as voluntary service contracts and make their situation technically legitimate. Which means we can't count on official rescue or law enforcement assistance, Maria concluded. Which means we do this ourselves, or it doesn't get done, Jake said. Zara, you mentioned that security is focused on buyers during auction events. How often do those happen? Monthly. The next one is scheduled in 8 days. Kozlov will be auctioning several rare items, including a collection of pre-war Terran artifacts and... She paused, her composure cracking slightly. And a young Centaurian mathematician whose analytical abilities have been enhanced through forced neural modification. The casual mention of selling sentient beings like luxury goods made Jake's stomach turn. Right. So we have 8 days to create false identities, acquire enough apparent wealth to warrant an invitation, and develop a plan for extracting your mother without getting everyone else killed in the process. When you summarize it like that, Tommy said, it sounds almost reasonable. Terrifying and probably suicidal, but reasonable. Maria emerged from the engineering bay with her arms full of equipment that looked like it belonged in a laboratory rather than a salvage ship. I've been thinking about the technical challenges. Those neural collars Zara described, they're not just restraint devices, they're integrated into the wearer's nervous system. Removing them incorrectly could cause permanent damage or death. So we need specialized medical equipment, Alex said. And someone who knows how to use it. I know someone, Jake said slowly. Dar. Rebecca Hayes operates a medical station near the Vega colonies. She specializes in treating trauma survivors and refugees, including people who've been subjected to illegal neural modifications. Will she help us? Zara asked. She'll help if I ask her to. But getting her involved means putting another person at risk. Zara stood and walked to the viewport, gazing out at the asteroid field where they'd found her hiding. When she turned back to face them, her expression held a determination that seemed to transform her from refugee to warrior. Captain Sullivan, my people have a saying, courage is not the absence of fear, but the presence of something more important than fear. Everyone who helps us risks their lives. But everyone who refuses to help ensures that innocents continue to suffer. Your people have good sayings, Jake said. We have many good sayings. We also had a beautiful world, advanced technology, and a peaceful society. Now we have sayings in each other, because those are the only things that survived the plague. Her voice carried no bitterness, only pragmatic acceptance. Sometimes good things require good people to risk what they have for what could be. Maria looked up from her equipment analysis. I can jury-rig medical extraction systems if Dr. Hayes provides the technical specifications. It won't be pretty, and it won't be comfortable, but it should be functional. Define won't be comfortable, Alex said. Have you ever had dental surgery performed by someone using mining equipment? That's a disturbing comparison. It's also an optimistic one. At least dental surgery is supposed to help you. Zara's laugh caught them all by surprise. Human humor is very strange. You make jokes about things that terrify you. It helps with the terror, Tommy explained. If you can laugh at something, it becomes less scary and more like a really complicated puzzle. And if you can't laugh at it, then you probably shouldn't be doing it in the first place. She nodded thoughtfully. I think I understand. Fear is information, but it should not be the only information you consider when making decisions. Exactly. Fear tells you about risks, but it doesn't tell you about possibilities. Jake activated the communication system and began composing a message to Dr. Hayes. The request would sound insane to anyone who didn't know his history of improbable successes, but Rebecca had patched up his crew often enough to understand that his crazy plans had a way of working out despite all logical expectations. While I'm arranging medical support, he said, I need everyone else to start working on our cover identities. Alex, what kind of buyer would Kozlov be most interested in meeting? Someone with expensive tastes, questionable ethics, and enough wealth to bid seriously on illegal goods. Preferably someone with connections to other potential customers. And someone who wouldn't be missed if they happened to disappear during their visit, Maria added cheerfully. That's reassuring, Tommy said. So we're planning to infiltrate a criminal fortress while pretending to be wealthy sociopaths who nobody would care about if we got murdered. It's not the worst plan we've ever had, Jake pointed out. What was the worst plan we ever had? Zara asked with genuine curiosity. The crew exchanged glances, and Jake realized they were about to traumatize their newest member with stories of their previous adventures. There was the time we decided to salvage a derelict space station that turned out to be full of malfunctioning security robots, Tommy began. Or the time we tried to outrun a solar flare while towing a cargo container full of unstable quantum cores, Maria continued. Or the time we accidentally started a war between two mining consortiums by salvaging materials from a disputed asteroid, Alex finished. Zara looked around the table at people who were discussing potentially fatal mistakes with the casual tone usually reserved for weather commentary. And you all survived these experiences? Obviously, Jake said. Though we did learn some valuable lessons about research and preparation. What kind of lessons? Always check if derelict space stations are actually derelict before boarding them. Always verify that cargo containers marked stable are actually stable before towing them. And always confirm ownership status before salvaging materials from asteroids that multiple parties might consider their property. Those seem like very basic precautions. They seem basic now, Tommy said. At the time, they felt like unnecessary complications that were slowing down profitable salvage operations. Humans learn from mistakes, Maria explained. Sometimes repeatedly. Zara's expression suggested she was reconsidering her life debt to people whose survival instincts were apparently calibrated for entertainment value rather than actual survival. Are you certain you are qualified to rescue my mother from a heavily defended criminal fortress? We're not qualified, Jake admitted. But we're experienced at doing things we're not qualified for and somehow not dying in the process. That's got to count for something. I suppose it does, she said slowly. Though I feel I should mention that Altarian culture includes very specific funeral rites for people who die attempting impossible heroic gestures. We'll try not to need them, Jake promised. But it's nice to know you've got backup plans. The infiltration of Kozlov's Reach began exactly according to plan, which lasted approximately 12 minutes before the first major deviation occurred and Jake found himself improvising with the creative desperation that had become his crew's signature survival strategy. His cover identity as Jonathan Sterling, wealthy collector of pre-war artifacts with ethically flexible acquisition policies, had gained him entry to the auction. What it hadn't prepared him for was the moment when Dmitry Kozlov personally escorted him through the station's residential quarters and Jake came face to face with Liana. She was smaller than he'd expected, with the same luminescent skin markings as her daughter but dimmed by exhaustion and something that looked like carefully controlled despair. The neural collar around her neck hummed with barely audible energy, and when she looked up at Jake's approach, her eyes held the distant focus of someone who'd learned not to hope too much. My dear Liana, Kozlov said in accented standard that carried undertones of possession and threat, I'd like you to meet Mr. Sterling, one of our more discerning collectors. Perhaps you could provide him with some insight into the emotional authenticity of tonight's Terran artifacts. Jake felt his carefully prepared cover story evaporate as Liana's empathic abilities locked onto his emotional state. Her eyes widened slightly, and he realized she was sensing his genuine horror at her condition, his determination to help, and the complex web of emotions surrounding her daughter's desperate plan. Mr. Sterling, she said carefully, her voice carrying musical harmonics that reminded Jake painfully of Zara, you have very intense feelings about art appreciation. I'm passionate about reuniting lost pieces with their proper homes, Jake replied, hoping she would understand the multiple layers of meaning in his words. Something flickered in her expression. Understanding, hope, and a warning that Kozlov was watching their interaction with the attention of someone who'd learned to read subtleties in human behavior. Passion is admirable, Kozlov said, though it must be tempered with practical considerations. Liana understands the importance of practical considerations, don't you, my dear? The collar at her throat pulsed with soft light, and Jake saw her wince almost imperceptibly. Yes, she whispered. Practical considerations are very important. Jake's comm unit chose that moment to vibrate with what sounded like a routine message but was actually Tommy's signal that the diversionary phase of their operation was about to begin. In approximately 10 minutes, a series of carefully orchestrated system failures would draw security attention away from the residential quarters, giving them their window for extraction. Mr. Sterling, Kozlov continued, I hope you'll find tonight's auction entertaining. We have some truly unique items, including several pieces that have never been offered through legitimate channels. I appreciate exclusive opportunities, Jake said, maintaining his cover while internally calculating distances, security positions, and extraction routes. Especially when they involve reuniting separated elements of a collection. The explosion that shook the station's outer hull was Tommy's idea of subtle, which meant it was roughly equivalent to announcing their presence with fireworks and a marching band. Emergency alarms began wailing as automatic systems reported hull breaches in the docking bay, and security personnel started moving with the urgent efficiency of people responding to genuine crisis. What the hell, Kozlov began, then caught himself and smiled apologetically at Jake. Please excuse me, Mr. Sterling. Minor technical difficulties. Liana will escort you to the auction hall. The moment Kozlov disappeared around a corner, Liana grabbed Jake's arm with surprising strength. You're here for Zara, she whispered urgently. She found you. She convinced you to help. She's safe, Jake assured her. She's on my ship with my crew, and we're getting you out of here. The collar, you can't remove it without medical equipment. It's integrated into my nervous system. Any attempt to force removal will. We have medical equipment. Dr. Rebecca Hayes provided specifications for safe extraction. My engineer jury-rigged the necessary tools. Tears began flowing down her face, but her expression remained carefully neutral in case they were being monitored. For years, she said. For years I felt her searching for me, felt her pain and determination. I began to believe rescue was impossible. Zara doesn't believe in impossible. She inherited that from someone, probably you. Another explosion, closer this time, sent tremors through the deck plating. Through the station's intercom system, they could hear conflicting reports of system failures, security breaches, and potential sabotage. The auction hall is this way, Liana said loudly, for the benefit of any surveillance systems. Then, quietly, the residential area has independent life support. If your people can create a large enough distraction, the automated systems will seal these sections to prevent atmospheric loss. Meaning will be trapped in here until the crisis passes. Meaning will have privacy for medical procedures that require delicate work. Jake activated his comm unit with a coded signal that would alert Maria to begin the final phase of their extraction plan. Within minutes, they would either be on their way back to his ship with Liana safely rescued, or they would all be prisoners of a very angry arms dealer with a talent for creative revenge. The medical extraction took place in a storage room that Maria had converted into an impromptu surgical suite using equipment that looked like it belonged in a hardware store rather than a hospital. Dr. Hayes had provided detailed instructions, but performing delicate neurological procedures while explosions echoed through the station required the kind of steady hands usually associated with professional surgeons rather than salvage engineers. This is going to hurt, Maria warned Liana, her tools positioned around the neural collar with careful precision. The collar's designed to cause maximum pain during removal attempts. We can dampen some of the feedback, but not all of it. I have endured 4 years of controlled pain, Liana said quietly. I can endure a few more minutes if it means freedom. The extraction process was simultaneously the longest and shortest 15 minutes of Jake's life. Liana's screams, muffled by a makeshift gag, echoed through the storage room while Maria worked with microscopic precision to disconnect neural interfaces without causing permanent damage. Zara knelt beside her mother, using her empathic abilities to provide what comfort she could while tears streamed down both their faces. When the collar finally deactivated and clattered to the floor, the sudden silence was deafening. Liana collapsed against her daughter, sobbing with the kind of relief that comes from having unbearable pressure suddenly removed. Mom, Zara whispered in their native language, words that Jake couldn't understand but that carried emotional harmonics of love, relief, and homecoming. My brave girl, Liana replied, also in Altarian. You found good people. You found family. Their reunion was interrupted by the sound of approaching security forces and Kozlov's voice echoing through the corridor with promises of creative and long-lasting revenge for anyone found responsible for the evening's disruption. Time to go, Alex announced from his position monitoring the corridor. We have about 2 minutes before this place becomes very unhealthy for unauthorized personnel. The escape through the station's maintenance tunnels was a masterpiece of controlled chaos, with Tommy's continued diversionary explosions providing cover while the team navigated through spaces that hadn't been designed for human access. Zara's empathic connection with both her mother and Jake's crew allowed her to coordinate their movements with unprecedented precision, turning their group into a single organism focused on survival and escape. They reached their ship just as Kozlov's security forces began systematic searches of the docking bays. Tommy's piloting skills, which had always bordered on the supernatural, got them clear of the station's defensive systems and into hyperspace before anyone could organize an effective pursuit. It wasn't until they were 3 star systems away from Kozlov's reach that Jake finally allowed himself to believe they had actually succeeded. Captain Sullivan, Lioness said during their first shared meal as a complete crew, "My daughter tells me she has offered you a life debt in gratitude for this rescue." "She has," Jake confirmed. "I've been trying to explain that it's not necessary." "Have you considered that it might not be about necessity?" Lioness asked with a smile that reminded him powerfully of Zara. Altarian culture includes many forms of chosen family bonds. Life debt is one of them, but so are friendship bonds, partnership bonds, and simple affection bonds. What's the difference? Life debt implies service and hierarchy. Friendship bonds imply equality and mutual support. Partnership bonds imply shared goals and responsibilities. Affection bonds imply. She glanced meaningfully at her daughter, who was blushing in a way that suggested empathic species had their own challenges with romantic subtlety. "Oh," Jake said, understanding dawning. "Oh. Zara has been offering you life debt," Lioness continued gently, "because she doesn't know the human words for what she actually feels. But I think you understand the difference between gratitude and affection, don't you?" Jake looked around the table at his crew, who were all studiously focused on their food while clearly listening to every word of the conversation. Then he looked at Zara, who was studying her hands with the concentration of someone trying to become invisible through sheer willpower. "Zara," he said softly, "would you like to stay with us because you feel obligated to, or because you want to?" She looked up at him with eyes that held starlight and possibilities. "Because this feels like home," she said simply. "Because your crew feels like family. Because you feel like..." She paused, searching for words in a language that didn't have adequate terms for Altarian emotional concepts. "Because I feel like someone you could choose to be with rather than someone you have to serve." Her smile was radiant. "Yes. Exactly that." "Good," Jake said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Because I was hoping you'd want to stay for the right reasons." "What are the right reasons?" she asked. Jake looked around at his crew, Maria grinning while cleaning hydraulic fluid from her fingers, Tommy pretending to study navigation charts while obviously listening to their conversation, Alex maintaining professional composure while his eyes reflected genuine warmth, and Lioness watching her daughter discover that love could exist without obligation or fear. "Because we're better together than we are apart," he said. "All of us." Outside the ship's viewports, stars stretched across the cosmos in patterns that suggested infinite possibilities. Jake's salvage crew had gained 2 new members, a reformed arms dealer had lost his most valuable asset, and somewhere in the vast complexity of an uncaring universe, a small group of people had chosen to care about each other. It wasn't the dramatic transformation that stories promised, but it was real progress made by real people doing the daily work of choosing kindness over convenience, family over isolation, and hope over fear. Jake squeezed Zara's hand gently and began planning their next salvage mission, knowing that whatever they found in the wreckage of abandoned ships, they'd face it together.